Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. Welcome to another edition of Let's Play. Now today we are not going to be doing games with only me playing. I would like to go over some stuff about this game in general. Some stuff that probably people don't bother discussing because it's not important, it's not what people want to hear. Well, it's something that I want to talk about because it's something that I'm fascinated in. You see, when I first started playing this game, 14, 15 years ago, this game was a lot different than it was now. This game was absolutely spot on with the real tanks. Now you have to understand, when this game first started, they only had America up to here, Germany up to here. I mean, we're talking way back in the day. Way back in the day. Soviet Union only had it up to here, and half of this was gone. Half of this was gone. All of this didn't exist, and all of this didn't exist. The USSR tree was significantly smaller. When I first started, I started out with this thing. And I said, this looks like a decent size. This looks like a decent sized country I can work on. My goal in playing this game was to have fun. That was number one. Number two, I'm going to set a goal. My goal was to unlock the entire country. Mind you, the entire country was not as big as it is now. Needless to say, 14 or 15 years later, I have almost the entire country unlocked. Granted, I didn't only play this country. I also got bored and played USA. Of course, not all of it was done. I got a few done, not a lot. Here and there, Some of these I still have. The ones that, the tanks with the check marks, I still own. The ones that have this, I sold to unlock to purchase the next one. But I never got through to purchasing the next one. So now the M4A1 Sherman and EZ8, I kept those two because I like those tanks. The T-29, that's the tank I left off with. I intended on grinding that tank all the way to the end, but it got caught up in USSR for a little while, and then eventually I just gave up. I had no intention of ever doing lights, ever. Only the farthest I ever got was this. I have one discount on it, and that's it, on the Chaffee. So I did the best I could, but I had no intention of ever doing the USA. Shame though. And then we have Germany. Well, at first I tried Germany. I tried the Lucas Tractor when I first started. I was like, considering I had a funny feeling this was a tank from World War I. Anything from Tier 1 has to be from World War I. So I figured, It was from the First World War. Can't judge a book by its cover. So I got past it. Went to the Panzer II. Got past it. Got to the Panzer IIIe. Then I went. Tried this. Tried this. And tried this. I tried all of them. And I started to not feel it. I was like, I'm not feeling this at all. Finally, I ended up here. And as soon as I got up to here, I went, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not attempting to go to the heavies. I'm done. So instead I moved over here to try and get this one. Moved over here, got this, and said, I'm done. No way. Then I unlocked this, tried it, and said, no, I don't like it. So I moved on to lights. Tried the Panzer II. Tried the Lukes. So far, so good. Leopard, so far, so good. And then I had a little bit of trouble with the Leopard. Not a lot, a little bit. I don't remember what it was. There was something about this tank I wasn't feeling. I had a funny feeling that all the rest of them were not going to be as good. So it was all going good until I got to Leopard. Then I went, nope. So I went back to these guys. And of course, I tried the artillery. And got halfway through the grill and said, nope. And I got to the tank destroyers and got to tier 5 and said, this is not that bad. The Stug 3 is really not a bad tank. It's pretty decent. Then I got the Jagdpanzer 4 and went, no, not happening. And I figured if the Jagdpanzer 4, I'm not happy with it, what makes me think I'm going to like the Nashorn? So I said, screw this. Let's try Soviets. Then all hell broke loose because I absolutely loved this piece of shit. This thing was my favorite tank in the entire world. I loved this tank. I played this tank so much. I ended up getting 1 million credits from just playing this tank alone. That's it. I had no intention of getting any farther than that. I had so much fun with that tank. This tank was a lot of fun. I had no idea if this thing was realistic or not. Quite honestly, I didn't give a shit. I was having fun, and that was it. I still have it. See? Check mark. I still own it. I refuse to get rid of it. I love that thing. That thing is so much fun. So I said, okay, my first impression is good. The rest of it has to be okay. And up until tier 5, I was right. Tiers 1 through 5 in USSR tree, nothing but fun. Tier 6 and higher, the fun was over. It became a chore. It became a chore that by then I had already tried all of them and gotten up to tier 6. So I said, listen, I'm already up to tier 6. I might as well finish the entire country. And then, by the time I got to tier 8, the announcement came that they were expanding the Russian tree. And things started branching out. So this branched out here. This is a new branch here. And this was a new branch here. And this was a new branch. So shit starting to hit the fan for a little while, and I was like, oh, phenomenal, good. You gotta be kidding me. Eventually, I started panicking at this point. Because I started realizing that, you know what? I think I got myself into some serious high water, serious shit. Shit's gonna start hitting the fan soon because I'm up Shit's Creek without a paddle. This country is huge. What did I get myself into? Granted, I had a lot of fun playing these tanks here. As soon as I got to these tanks, it became a chore. It didn't become... This wasn't fun anymore. It became a chore. I mean, I had people one shot. I had people coming right up to me and shooting me, killing me in one shot. As soon as I hit tier 6, I had people instantly killing me in one shot. By the time I hit tier 6, people were killing me in one shot. People were bitching and complaining. Here I am trying to play a game and have fun. And all people are doing is bitching and complaining, screaming and yelling and whatever. So I said, you know what? Fuck this shit. I'm done. I spent all my money on purchasing all the premium vehicles I had. I bought them all. Why? Because I got sick and tired of grinding. Got sick and tired of hearing them bitch and complain. So I had the premium vehicles. I drove the crap out of these things. I got a mastery level on the Churchill 3. I got a mastery level on the Matilda. SU-100Y I hated with a passion. I don't know why, but I hated it with a passion. SU-122-44, it's okay. I don't recommend you blowing your wad on it. What I do recommend you getting, out of all the premium vehicles, I do recommend you getting T127. I do recommend that. Okay? I do recommend you get this. Why? Because the British Churchill has, the Churchill 1 does not have fender skirts. Now, if you remember, the original British Churchill 1, let me go back to the British, for example. This is the Churchill 1, okay? This is what the British use, okay? Now, the Churchill 3 is based off of this. The only thing is the Russians decided to put skirts on it. They decided to close this gun up. They put skirts on it to cover the tracks. And that's it. And of course they put a much bigger engine in it. The Russians are into that. Soviets were big into that. So it had to be faster. And that engine that was in there was not fast enough for them. So they took the Churchill that they lend-leased from the British and decided to make it their own. So the Churchill 3 was made. This is the Churchill 1 after the Soviets got their hands on it. What they did was they added side armor and track armor. See, for the tracks? The tracks are well protected now. If you'll notice, the tracks are exactly the same as the Churchill 1. Why? Because this is the Churchill 1. The only thing is, the gun in the middle here is gone. Instead, they have like a little 25mm machine gun right here. They felt there was no need to have two large guns in the front. I think the small gun in the front, was supposed to be originally it was supposed to be a flamethrower. You ever heard of something called the Churchill Crocodile? Churchill Crocodile was a tank that the British made during World War II. They decided to take a Churchill tank and put a gun in the front, like the Churchill 1. Okay? Allow me to show you guys. Let's see. Where is the Churchill 1? This was the Churchill Crocodile. That was a flamethrower right there. That was a quarter pounder. And being towed behind here, there was a tow loop. And it towed a trailer that had fuel in the trailer. The flamethrower would feed fuel from the towed case, and it would toast anything in front of it. That was the Churchill Crocodile. Churchill Crocodile was supposed to be a bunker buster. Before bunker busters were even a thing, the British decided to just take a flamethrower to the bunkers, and that should take care of it. Instead of wasting munitions on the bunkers, all they had to do is just take a flamethrower to it. Anybody in it would die. Done. Good idea, honestly. That was a very good idea on their part. Anyway, the Churchill Crocodile actually existed. It actually did exist. It was a real tank. In fact, World of Tanks offered that tank, or a tank that looked like it but wasn't exactly that tank. The tank that World of Tanks actually offered you, that called it the Churchill Crocodile, did not look like this and did not have the trailer behind it. So therefore, it was just a Churchill. It was just a regular old Churchill tank. It was not a flamethrower. It did not have the trailer behind it. So therefore, it was not the Churchill Crocodile. They called it the Churchill Crocodile, but that's not what it was. The Churchill Crocodile was a Churchill 1 style tank with the quarter pounder and the flamethrower right here. And the fuel line would run through the bottom of the tank, and a hose would end up right out the back with a tow hook. In fact, here's the tow loops. See? Right there? Those two tow loops towed the trailer that was behind this tank. Okay, guys? In that tank was the fuel. Was the volatile fuel that powered the flamethrower. Right there. This was the Churchill Crocodile. The original Churchill 1 was converted into the Churchill Crocodile. Also, the original Churchill 1 was also converted for the invasion for D-Day. It was also converted into a tank that, how do I describe it? A demining tank. A tank that was used to get rid of the landmines. What they did was, they took a Churchill tank and either here or there, they welded 2 bars straight into the body. Probably here. Welded 2 bars straight out. And after they did that, they had chains hanging from the bars, and the chains were dragging across the floor. All they did was slowly run that tank through, and then eventually the chains would set off the landmines, and they were clear. So then the Allies only had to follow the tanks that had the chains in the front. The British and the Americans both had tanks that set off the landmines. They both had tanks that set off landmines. I think the Americans used the M4 Shermans. I think they did something similar. I think they had 2 posts in the front, a post in the middle, just like the Churchill did. And they had chains hanging like that, and the chains brushed up against the mine detector and set off the landmine. It would set off the landmine so far away from the tank that it wouldn't even affect the tank. But it would set off the landmine. So whatever path that tank took, every single tank had to take that path because that path was clear. These tanks always went first. Always. The Churchill and the Sherman were both used as mine clearing tanks. In fact, the Churchill was not only a landmine tank, but it was also a bunker buster in the form of the Churchill Crocodile, which was given away in World of Tanks. The Churchill Crocodile was not the real Churchill Crocodile. The Churchill Crocodile was a flamethrower. The Churchill Crocodile was meant to get rid of the bunkers, was meant to keep the bunkers free of people. So it flew huge amounts of flames out, far enough that it could hit the bunkers and set everything in the bunkers on fire. I mean, huge amounts of flames came flying out of that thing. That was meant to be a bunker attack tank. The Churchill Crocodile was absolutely lethal. The Germans created this huge amounts of bunkers, and the British were right on. The British knew exactly how to get rid of them. So they created the largest flamethrower that was ever created in World War II. And that was the Churchill Crocodile. That thing was evil. It barbecued them alive. It was awesome. But World of Tanks can't have a flamethrower. Can't give away a flamethrower because you can't kill a tank with a flamethrower. Granted, the Churchill Crocodile did have a normal quarter-pounder gun, but it also towed a fuel trailer behind it. So it had the flamethrower underneath. It also towed a fuel truck behind it. So I mean, there are certain things that the Churchill Crocodile in this game was missing. There's a lot of things that the original Churchill Crocodile had. The one in this game was missing. So if you were able to pick up the Churchill Crocodile in this game, you did not get exactly what was created in real life. The original Churchill Crocodile was a Churchill 1 tank. Okay? That had a quarter-pounder gun. Standard quarter-pounder gun. It was a normal Churchill 1 tank. But below it, it had the flamethrower. Below it. Just like this tank has. This tank has the exact same thing. It has a flamethrower right there. That's a flamethrower. That's exactly what that is. The Churchill Crocodile had the quarter-pounder gun, the flamethrower in front, and it towed the fuel behind it. It had a two-wheel cart, armored cart. It was an armored cart that it towed behind it. A two-wheel armored cart that was towed behind it using, I don't know if they have the original tow hooks. Yes, they do. See the original tow hooks? There's the tow loops right there. So they had a cart. It was towing a fuel cart behind it. And behind the fuel cart, so this was the original Churchill Crocodile. Okay, guys? The only difference between this and Churchill Crocodile is that the Churchill Crocodile had a cart that was attached to these hooks right here. A two-wheel cart that towed behind it. Okay, guys? And had a camo net over it. There's also said that some of the Churchill Crocodiles even had two steel bars coming out from the bottom part here and had a couple of chains to get rid of the landmines. I was even told I had even heard rumors that the Churchill Crocodiles doubled as a landmine. So the British were hell-bent on making sure that they had one vehicle do everything they needed. And they didn't want to create too many vehicles and have to waste money. So they had one vehicle do odd jobs. So they made one bunker buster and landmine clearer. So on D-Day, the World of Tanks celebrated D-Day. Now what they showed you is that they showed the Churchills with the chains in the front. That did happen. That is real. But in other areas of the battlefield where the Americans weren't able to go, the British also had their Churchill crocodiles with the landmine clearing chains in the front. So the Churchill crocodiles, mainly this tank, have the chains on the front with the flamethrower and the cart behind it. So the Churchill crocodile was meant to be it was not meant to kill anything. It was meant to kill things that would hurt somebody else. For example, they would take out bunkers, anybody in the bunkers. They would take out landmines with that thing. That thing's job was only to do that. That's it. It had a gun like this, but they almost never used it. Its only job was to get rid of the bunkers and the landmines. And when they ran out of fuel, they jumped out. They either turned it around and went right back to base and refilled it, or if it was an emergency, disconnect the fuel tank and disconnect the fuel. Take the chains off and run it like a regular tank, like a regular Churchill. So this tank right here is the Churchill crocodile. They had chains in the front, two big steel poles coming out of the front with chains hanging to get rid of the landmines. And they had those two loop hooks right there towing a cart filled with fuel for the flamethrower in the front right there. So in reality, World of Tanks actually did include the original Churchill crocodile. It's in this game. What you don't know is that the Churchill crocodile was shown to you as a first generation Churchill, which is not really the case. I mean, granted, it was a first generation Churchill, but the British had upgraded their Churchills eventually. Okay, guys? What they figured was, what do we do with the original Churchills? And they looked at each other, I don't know. What if we put fender skirts on them, cover the tracks, get rid of the flamethrower for the crocodile, and lend lease the tanks to the Soviets? That's an idea. So that's what they did. Any extras that they had of the Churchill crocodiles and the land clearing tanks that they didn't need after D-Day, they figured just lend lease them to the Soviets. And that's exactly what they did. The Churchill crocodiles were disbanded, changed, fender skirts were added, and then were sent off to Soviets. And the Soviets were able to purchase them through a Lend-Lease program. Don't believe me? Check this out. They even included it. I swear to God, they included it as part of the vehicle details. A British tank supplied to the USSR under Lend-Lease. USSR received a total of 301 vehicles. Not a lot of vehicles. You notice The Churchill tanks, they produced thousands and thousands of Churchill tanks. Thousands. Why did they only receive 300? Why? Because these Churchill 3s were all the Churchill Crocodiles and all the land mining Churchills. These were all the Churchill tanks that were not meant for normal combat. These were the Churchills that were only meant for specific purposes, that were then sort of like upgraded piecemeal together and sent out to Soviets to help them with their defense. So, if you want to know what happened to the Churchills, that's what happened to the Churchills. The reason why that 301 Churchills were land-leased to the Soviet Union was because they didn't need the crocodiles anymore, and they didn't need the landmine clearing tanks anymore. They didn't need them. They were just, for the amount of money it took to put them back into normal service, all they have to do is take the crap off of them, put fender skirts on them, and send them to Soviets, and the Soviets can purchase them. Now don't forget, the original Churchill 1s were underpowered and had a smaller gun. And the original Churchills were not as good as the Churchill 4s. Now this was a Churchill 1 with the same skirts as the Churchill 4. Now, if you look at this Churchill, this is the skirts of a Churchill. Churchill 7. Okay, Churchill, whatever, 7, whatever. This is the upper skirts of a Churchill 7. Okay, guys? This was placed on top of a Churchill 1. Okay, guys? See the difference in the turret between the Churchill 3 and the Churchill 7? See that? See how it's more rounded? See how the gun's bigger? The gun's a lot bigger. See that? It's a much bigger gun. It's a bigger, rounder turret. The original, the Churchill 3 is the Churchill 1 with fender skirts on it, which means the Churchill 3s that were land-leased to Soviets are all of the remaining mine-clearing tanks and the Churchill Crocodiles. After they were disbanded and not used anymore, instead of putting them back into service and upgrading them, all they did was put the skirts on from the Churchill 7 and land-leased them to Soviets. So Soviets had a Churchill 1 with fender skirts on. So when next time you buy the Churchill 3, all you're paying for is a Churchill 1 with fender skirts on that used to be a Churchill Crocodile. Remember that. Now let me prove something to you. Let me show you guys what changed. As you know, I already own this tank. This is the Churchill 1's turret right here. See that? It's squared off. Now this is the Churchill 1's gun. This is Churchill 1 right here. Okay. Good so far. Tow hooks. Tow hooks are gone. See that? They took the tow hooks off. The gun in the front where the flamethrower was, it's gone. See that? The turret is exactly the same as the Churchill Crocodile. Same thing. They put the Churchill 7 fender skirts. This is the fender skirts of a Churchill 7 right here. They put these fender skirts on the original Churchill 1 and called it the Churchill 3. Once all that crap was taken off of it, they gave it to the Soviet Union. They sold the Soviet Union as a Lend-Lease program. Not telling them that they were flamethrower tanks or they were mine clearing tanks. They just said, you need tanks? Got you covered. No problem. And that's what they gave them. So this is what's left of the mine clearing tanks and the Churchill Crocodiles that they no longer needed. This is what they did with them. They put fender skirts on them and Lend-Leased them to the Soviet Union. And they redesigned and rebuilt a brand new Churchill from scratch. Interesting, huh? Now, if you notice, see the turret? How it's so squared off in the front? Squared off turret. Now, this is a Soviet thing. I don't know why, but it's a Soviet thing. My guess, the fuel storage compartment in the original Churchill 1 was a little odd. I think it was too odd for them. Why? Because of the Churchill Crocodile. The Churchill Crocodile had that tow trailer behind it. Okay, guys? And they had a hose exit so it could suck in the fuel. So naturally, the fuel for the tank had to be kept separately from the fuel back here. So the internal fuel tank was not big enough for the Soviet Union. So they naturally thought, okay, why do they have this little tank for this big tank? We're getting rid of this. So they got rid of the fuel tank and put their own back here. Not realizing what this tank's purpose was. Originally, they took the tank, added this oil tank here, and made that the fuel tank. Not realizing that this was not a standard main battle tank. This was a very, very old Churchill tank. So this is a Churchill. In one of the tanks, they call it a Churchill 1. But this was the Churchill Crocodile. Without the fender skirts, of course, and without that fuel tank, and with the trailer behind it, this was the Churchill Crocodile. Dead serious. You have to pay attention to the details. The details in the real tank versus the details in the virtual tanks. Now, the Churchill Crocodile in World of Tanks, it looked a little bit like the Churchill one, but not enough. It didn't have the tow trailer. It had, of course, it had a similar thing. It had a similar thing to the Churchill one. The only difference is that the World of Tanks version did not have an active flamethrower. The World of Tanks version was a Churchill 3 without this and without the defender skirts. The Churchill Crocodile was a British Churchill 1 tank without the trailer towed behind it. Okay, guys? That's all the World of Tanks Churchill Crocodile, that's all it was. The Churchill Crocodile World of Tanks was a Churchill 1 without the trailer towed behind it. That's it. It's basically this. This is the Churchill Crocodile, except Churchill Crocodile did not have fender skirts and did not have that. The Soviets added their own fuel tank because they felt as though the fuel tank on this tank was too small. Well, there's a very, 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 very good reason why it was so small. Because this tank was towing 1 million gallons of fuel behind it. So, in reality, it couldn't hold that much fuel because that's a lot of weight it's carrying. Plus, I mean, it needed fuel for itself to run. So naturally, it couldn't run that fast. So they had to use a much smaller engine and a much fuel efficient, use a much smaller and fuel efficient engine. So it could run slower, use less gas. What I was told the Churchill Crocodile used the same fuel that they used to power the tanks, which is diesel. And which means that this thing probably had an unbelievably huge fuel tank. My guess is that the Churchill Crocodile probably got its fuel from the fuel being towed behind it. Granted, it had fuel in its own storage compartment, but it also had the option of gauging fuel from the flamethrower. That's what I was told. So the Churchill Crocodile was definitely an odd tank. In its own right, it was an odd tank. I would have to say, to be honest with you, if you really want to make a comparison between the Churchill 3 and the Churchill Crocodile, in reality, there's really no comparison. I mean, look at the Churchill 7, for example. Let's compare the Churchill 7 with the Churchill 3. Most people are going to say, okay, they lend-leased the Churchill 7. Everybody's going to argue with me and say, okay, the Churchill 7 was a lend-lease tank sent to the Russians, and it was called the Churchill 3. The only difference is a different turret and a different gun was put on it. Okay, that's fine. Can you explain one thing to me? How come the Churchill set? Okay, that's fine. This is how everyone tells me the Churchill 7 was actually the tank that was lend-leased. Well, granted, this is the front of a Churchill 7. And this is the front of a Churchill 3. But the rear of a Churchill 7, the Churchill 3 does not have this rear end. Not at all. These are not here. This is not here. This is not here. And this is certainly not there. And this is not here. This rear end was completely changed from the Churchill 1s. In reality, they did not use the Churchill 7 to lend-lease as a lend-lease. They used the Churchill 1s. Why? Because the Churchill 1s were used as crocodiles and as mine-clearing tanks. And they didn't want to upgrade their existing Churchills, so they sent the old tanks that we use for other things over to the Soviets and made them buy the tanks. And the Soviets used them like they were god tanks. Why? Because Soviets were using things like this. They were using KVs, they were using other stuff. The Soviet Union, at the time of the war, was fielding this. This is what the Soviet Union was fielding. Hundreds and thousands of this. This. And that. KV-1 and the T-34. Those are the only two tanks that I know of that Soviet Union used against the Germans. The Germans only saw those tanks. KV, not KV-1, the KV. The KV and the T-34. That's it. Now this is the realistic, the absolute positively realistic version of the original T-34. This is not the video game version. This is supposed to be a realistic version of the original T-34. The same one that they use that the Russians are attempting to use in Ukraine. Yes, I'm dead serious. Same exact tank. The same tank they use to parade up and down the streets during their Victory Day parades and stuff like that. Have the glorious Soviet Union and all that stuff. And yeah, this is the same tank that they parade around today. The same one. 1941 it was first created. It was first produced. And they never changed it. For what I was told, the design had not changed in so long. All they did was change over the years. They changed the turret, changed the gun, and I think that was it. Now, the T-34s in the game, granted, the T-34-85 this did exist. This is a real tank. Why? Because the T-34 chassis was still being used. T-34 chassis was being used for decades. I mean, they used and abused this chassis as much as they possibly could. They wanted to get way more mileage out of this tank. They added more fuel tanks to it. A lot more fuel tanks, as you can see. Soviets like to add external fuel tanks. Why? I don't know. But they do that. Exhaust is right here. Intake is right here. Fuel right there. That's the exhaust. That's the intake. Sorry. Forgot the exhaust is right there. My bad. They even have tow hooks right there. Spare tracks. There's a tow rope. If they ever have to tow something, they can. They have tow ropes right there. There's more spare tracks right there. Now here is some scopes right here. 1, 2, and 3. There's more scopes up here. And more scopes right here. Just so you can see out of the tank, so you see what we're doing. So now exiting the tank, you have a crew of 5. Exit here. And there should be one down here. See that right there? That's also, they have scopes here, but this also doubles as a hatch. So this is also a hatch. If you'll look very carefully, you'll see makeshift hinges right there. See that? This is a hatch. It's meant to hinge upwards this way. This up here is also a hatch on latches, hinges this way. They have a lot of things to look out of here, as you can see. A lot of holes in the turret. A lot of holes in the turret. Why? Because in back then, in the 1940s, they didn't have the technology yet to actually make a periscope. The Americans eventually had periscopes. Sure, yeah. Let's see if any of the American tanks actually have the actual periscopes. I don't really know at what point. And let's try the M48 Patton. I'm not sure at what point they had periscopes. Now this is an M48 Patton. Alright, see this? See how it's not a hole? See how it's not an open hole? See how it's got glass in front of it? That's glass with a mirror behind it. With a periscope going down. These are periscopes. See that? There's nothing behind it. It's only this. These are periscopes right here. See that? That's a periscope. This is a very big periscope though, because it has something behind it. This is a very big periscope. As you can see, there's glass. That's another periscope. Anywhere you see glass is a periscope. They don't have holes or ports. They only have periscopes. The Americans were smart. When they started building their tanks, they started thinking, you know. But leave it to the Soviet Union not to think. So here is, well, a tank that was never actually built per se. As you can see, this is, well, a top tier tank according to the game. In this game, this is a later tank, so this should be a lot newer. This should have newer stuff in it. And of course, this has total bullshit stuff on it. This is not realistic at all. It has stuff on it that shouldn't have. This is not really good to go by because this has what's called the 3D style. And 3D styles are not meant to be realistic. They're meant to look kind of different, per se. I should say different. But what I do find interesting about this 3D style is how realistic they are truly making it. Because the Soviet Union was really, really into making sure that their vehicles can tow other vehicles. So you see winches, towing winches. You're seeing, of course, the standard Soviet fuel tank, of course. You're seeing tow winches right here. Tow cables. I mean, you're seeing a lot of stuff that should be, that you'd see a Soviet tank would have. Soviet Union tanks, they were meant to recover. They didn't see, American tanks had recovery vehicles. American tanks had specific recovery vehicles that were used to recover tanks that got disabled. Soviets did not have that, so they had to provide equipment on their tanks to recover other vehicles. For example, winches, tow cables, stuff like that. Soviets had to provide stuff for the crew so that they could recover tanks on the field. They could say, while you're out, we need you to go recover a KV tank that broke down. Do you have the recovery stuff? Do you have the cables? Yes, I do. Okay, go get it. Take these guys with you. Make sure they support you. Okay, no problem. So there's a lot of the countries differ. The Americans were really big on having specific vehicles for specific jobs. For example, they had their most when they first launched the Shermans, the M4A1 was created. Okay, guys? Eventually, what they decided was they were going to make this into a into a mine clearing tank. So, 2 bars were welded right into the front, extended out. Okay? 2 more bars were welded in here, and that extended out. They had chains and chains. And it just drove like it normally would. One was close up, one was out far away. So if the first set of chains did not trip off the mines, second set of chains definitely will. This way, the tank is not driving blind across the battlefield. It's definitely getting all of the mines and setting them off. So, the Churchill mine clearing tank was not as good as the Shermans. The Shermans had 2 layers of chains. Heavy chains and medium chains. A high bar and a low bar. And extended out farther in advance. And they went a little slower. They drove a little slower. Much slower. So therefore they used the original M4 Shermans. The old ones, the really old ones, and converted those into mine clearing tanks. Now, when they made the M4A1s were the tanks that dropped on D-Day. These tanks here, they dropped down on D-Day. The original M4 Shermans, I don't even think they have the original M4 Shermans in this game. No, they don't. The original M4 Shermans, which they do not have in this game, those were converted over to the mine clearing tanks. They were not as used. I am very surprised they don't have those. Because the M4A1 was the very first variant of the M4 Sherman. The M4 was M4 Sherman, M4A1, M4AE8, and the T20. This is called Easy 8. I don't know why they called it. I don't know why they called this an Easy 8, but that's what they called it. This was called an Easy 8. This tank was developed later on. It's the same M4 Sherman. No, there's a big, huge difference. Tank has thicker armor in the front, more armor in the front, a larger gun, and this tank is a little bit better on gas. So, because I know fuel was kind of a problem. Refilling fuel was very hard. So, naturally, fuel trucks couldn't fill the tanks up because they'd get blown up. So, there's one thing the Churchill Crocodiles were good for. They could very easily use those as fuel trucks. Armored fuel trucks. All they had to do is just decide to all they had to do is just tow a really big armored fuel truck behind it. That's all they had to do. Very easy. Very easy. One of the main reasons why a lot of the Churchills had tow loops behind them, because a lot of times they were used for towing stuff like tanks, fuel, stuff like that. Kind of like the Shermans, not the Easy 8s. If you notice, the Easy 8s don't have that. M4A1s and the original M4 Shermans, yeah, they kind of do. There's nothing there. If you'll look very carefully, you'll see there's nothing there. All you'll see is an abandoned ship door right there. And you'll also see 2 exhausts right there. You'll also see two tow hooks right here. So in reality, this tank could also do the same exact thing as the Churchill Crocodile. This can tow a trailer behind it. They could remove this gun and attach a flamethrower, and that can also be a flamethrower. They did the same thing. They did the same thing that the British did to the Churchills. The only difference is that the British decided to use a heavy tank. The Americans used a medium tank. Now, there was good and bad parts about this. Using a medium tank saves on gas, and the tank can go places and not be spotted as easily. The bad part about it is, when you're trying to clear mines, you can't clear mines for a heavy tank with the Sherman. The British mine clearing tanks were better than the Shermans. Why? Because the British Churchill tanks have a water berth and therefore had a water poles alongside, had more chains. So they were able to clear a water path. So if your tank was wider than the M4 Sherman, your vehicle was wider than the Sherman, then you run a very high risk of hitting a mine. So you had to be, in order to follow this tank that's clearing mines, you have to be the same width or smaller. Which is one of the main reasons why you never saw come on, where are my heavies? Which is why you never saw stuff like this. Which is the reason why you never saw stuff like this in World War II. This came out about around the same time as World War II, but really, in reality, how are you going to situate this to fit a mine clearing? Now, the Churchill is made to be versatile, bendable, versatile. The American tanks in the beginning were not versatile. They are now, but back then, they were not. So you were not able, I mean, granted, it had tow hooks in the front. So in reality, you were able to yank a tank or a vehicle out of a ditch in an emergency. That's the only good part about the American tanks, is that they had the hooks in the front. And they had hooks in the back. So if somebody had to get pulled out of a ditch, if like a Jeep had to get pulled out of a ditch, this thing can do it. No problems. But then again, this can do it too. This has the same things. So why drag a heavy tank? Why drag one heavy tank on a boat when you can fit 3 Shermans? Think for a minute right now, right? You have boats with tanks on those boats. You have to make it to Europe as quickly as you possibly can. What do you take with you? You're going to take tanks, and a lot of them. I mean, not big tank, little tanks, not everything. You're going to take one tank, and you're going to take as many of that one tank as possible. So the tank has to be able to do a million different tasks in one job. So they created the M4A1 for D-Day. D-Day was where the M4A1 shined. The M4A1 Shermans dropped on D-Day. They had everything they possibly needed. They had hooks in the front. They had tow ropes. They had hooks in the back. They had fuel storage, ammo storage. They had armor where it had to be. It was all sloped. The turret was sloped. The body was sloped. They had, for the first time ever, they had periscopes and not slots. These are periscopes right here. These are not slots. There's not a lot of weak spots in this thing. Granted, these are periscopes. This is the only slot they have. Actually, no, that's a periscope too. See? There's nothing behind it. That's a periscope. That's the periscope. And the abandoned ship hatches are right here and right here. And the emergency escape hatch in the turret is right there. So, commander, driver, radio man, gunner, loader. Small tank. For how they made it, this was the best tool for the job. This was all they needed. The only thing the Americans needed to take was as many of these as possible. If they took only these, they'd be fine. They didn't need tank destroyers. They didn't need light tanks. They didn't need heavy tanks or assault tanks. All they needed was as many of these as they could fit on the boats. And that's it. Bring all the spare parts, all the ammunition, all the fuel, everything with them. And that's it. Sometimes they had, what I even heard from the grapevine was, I overheard that they were taking them on boats. And when they dropped down from D-Day, the boats were unable to go, some of the boats were unable to drop down. Granted, they had some boats with ramps that dropped down the beach. Some of the boats could not do that. So they had to crane. So they had to drop the ramp down on the water, drive the Shermans on the water, and float the Shermans to the beach. The Shermans had an attachment attached to some of the M4A1s, some of the old ones. And then also the M4A1s, right? The old, these right here, had flotation devices attached to them. Right there. And right there. And in the front, they have the chains attached to them. Here and here. The purpose of the M4A1s is that the M4A1s were used as flotation. They would float them to the beaches, and they would clear the path for the Easy 8s to be dropped down on the skid boats. So the M4A1s were slowly floated, slowly floated themselves to the beach and drove down a straight path. And little by little, they would clear paths so that this way those touchdown boats would stop right at the path of the Sherman where it stopped. They would drop the door down. Everything on that boat would come flying out and take the same exact path that the Sherman took. That's how they did it. That's how they did it on D-Day. They used M4A1s as first touchdowns and used Easy 8s on the boats. So in reality, both of them saw D-Day, but these guys right here were first contact. M4A1s are first contact right there on the beach. These guys and The original Churchills and the Churchill crocodiles with the mine clearers chains on the front. The Churchill crocodiles and these were first contact. Their job was to clear a path for the Allies and to clear the bunkers. That was a crocodile's job, was to clear a path and to clear the bunkers. The bunkers were a serious problem. Serious, huge concrete menaces with big, big guns. They had to be silenced, otherwise the assault team would not be able to make it. So these guys had to clear a path. So the M4A1 would float itself down and then slowly carve a path. Then the crocodiles would follow, flamethrow all the bunkers. Then the M4A1s would clear a path for the crocodiles, and the crocodiles would take them out. So first touchdown on D-Day were the Churchill crocodiles, and these things with the mine clearing chains. Sometimes they put mine clearing chains on the front of the crocodiles. Sometimes. So anyway, I've been bullshitting for God knows how long about tank shit. It's fun. All this is in my opinion. This is based off of what I saw in documentaries and fact books here and there, and correct me if you want to, but that's what I saw. That's what I learned. This game is a lot of fun, and this game is supposed to be fun. This game does not replace school. Know this. Granted, they look very eerily similar, but this game should not replace going to school and learning this at school. Not at all. Learning all of this at school, you'll learn more in school than you will by playing this game. This game is a lot of fun, but this game is not meant to be a learning tool. Know that. There are things in this game that they cannot do. There's things that they did in real life that they cannot do in this game. They just can't do it. Otherwise, nobody will play it. So, for the sake of the game, they absolutely cannot do certain things. And I do understand that. And I do respect that. Because a game is a game. This game is not a historical history book. This is a game. A game that's meant to be played, enjoyed, and a game that's fun. Granted, the tanks are very realistic. And some tanks are historically accurate. For example, anything that says object, any tanks that say object, guarantee did not exist. Anything that says object was not made. They existed only in blueprints. Anything with an actual designation, like T50, T-3485, T-54, T-54, KV-220-2, stuff like that, that actually existed. Okay, guys? Stuff like this, that never existed. That was only in blueprints. That existed only in blueprints. That only existed in blueprints. Those are all blueprint tanks. Here's another blueprint tank that didn't exist. There's another blueprint tank that didn't exist. Oddly enough, high tier tanks. They were all blueprint tanks. That and this. All blueprint tanks. Why? Because by the time these tanks were even created, were even thought up, the Soviet Union was starting to fall apart by then. Of course, there was times where, you know what? I have a funny feeling that some of the high tier tanks did exist. Granted, some of the high tier tanks probably did exist. For example, the Tier 10 IS-7. It says, and their information is correct, mind you. Their information is correct. Development of the IS-7 started in spring of 1945. Okay. Prototype successfully underwent trials in 1946, 1947, which means they were an object, not a tank. However, the IS-7 never saw mass production, which means this tank was only an object tank. This tank never actually received the IS-7 name. It was considered an object name. It should have been object with a number. Tanks that were never created in the Soviet Union received object. Tanks that were never created or never actually mass produced received that designation. They were never given actual designations like that. This tank was never created. They never had an opportunity to mass produce this. So, now, let's read about the IS-4. Maybe this made it. I don't know. Let's check it out. This project was developed by the Design Bureau of the Kirov plant starting December 1943. So it's earlier. So this one might have made it. 2 prototypes of the Object 701 were built. So they built 2 prototypes called the Object 701. Number 5 was recommended in adoption. Come on, I lost track. Okay, they were built. After prototype trials, design was improved. In late 1944 and early 1945, 2 more prototypes underwent trials. Object 701 number 5 was recommended for adoption into service. However, production was called off in favor of the IS-3 just entering mass production. Mass production. After the IS-3, production was suspended in 1946. Production of the IS-4 began. So IS-4 was created first, but that project was suspended in favor of the IS-3. IS-3 was favorable above all the rest, which I do understand the IS-3 would be favorable because this tank was actually mass produced. This tank was the only heavy tank that was actually seen on mass production lines. They produced enough IS-3s. They produced as much IS-3s as they did T-34s. So you can imagine how many IS-3s existed. A lot. A lot of them existed. IS-3 tank took part in the Allied victory. Do you remember Putin saying, "Don't interrupt my Victory Day parade. Don't interrupt my Victory Day parade"? Well, May of 1945, September 7, 1945, they drove their brand new IS-3 tanks in the Allied victory parade through Berlin. So they mass-produced this tank after the World War. They totally mass-produced this tank like crazy. But this tank never saw service. They mass-produced it and they used it in parades. That's it. They used it in parades at the end of the war. So this technically was the very last heavy tank Soviets produced, was IS-3. Because the IS-4 was directly after, IS-4 was after that. And well, the IS-4 was in blueprints. They made one prototype, Object 701. Now, Object 701 doesn't exist. Why does Object 701 not exist? Because Object 701 was renamed in this game only. It was renamed. This is the Object 701. This is not the IS-4. In reality, this is the Object 701. Why? This tank was not created. Why was this tank not created? Because the IS-3 saw mass production at the end of World War II. So, why would they need to mass produce why would they feel the need to mass produce a tank at the end of World War II? Why would they feel the need to mass produce a heavy tank at the end of World War II? Granted, they mass produced this tank and stored them and use them for parades. That's fine, but why bother? Why bother mass producing a tank if you have no intention of ever using it? It's a waste. So the IS-3 was the very last tank that was mass produced. Hands down. This tank was mass produced at the very end of World War II. And it was used after that fact. This tank was used, my guess, for the Cold War and all that stuff. And of course, this was probably created at blueprints, in blueprints only. When they realized that the Cold War was not really doing anything, they figured, okay, we'll just leave it in blueprints, we'll leave prototypes. That's it. Don't forget, the Cold War was shortly after, was after the World War. And the Cold War, in the Russians, Soviets thought the Cold War was a big deal. So they started prototyping all kinds of weird fucking tanks. And all these tanks were all the products of the Cold War. These are all prototypes from the Cold War. Right here. All these were a lot of these tanks here were manufactured. Some were not. Some were manufactured. So it honestly all depends on what tank you're looking at. Let's take the T-10 for example. This is a Tier 9. Now, development started in 1849. Vehicle entered service in 1953 under the designation T-10. Subsequent development yielded several modifications of the tank. The most mass-produced being the T-10M. T-10M. Whenever they say M, that means mobility, which means it has a bigger engine and better tracks. That's it. 2,500 vehicles were produced of this tank. They were probably produced during the Cold War, probably. So the T-10 was actually a Cold War tank. But they only made 2,500 of them because they realized that the Cold War was really nothing they had to really worry about. But regardless, 2,500 vehicles were manufactured anyway for the Cold War. Now let's see where their artillery is at. Prototype was never manufactured. Prototype was never built. This was never made. That was never made. That's blueprints only. Object, that's blueprints only. Let's see. Developed from 1932 to 1937. 2 prototypes modernized in 1940. It never entered mass production. I bet you I know which one did. I can't believe it. Oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. For real? I bet you I know the tank that actually saw mass production. I bet you I know which one did. How much you want to make a money bet? This one actually did. How much you want to make a money bet that this tank saw mass production? And this is called the collector's tank. They call this a collector's tank. Developed on the basis of the Su-14 in 1936, a prototype was manufactured and tested in 1937. The project supervisor was purged, and the project was canceled. The prototype was shipped for storage in 1941. During the Battle of Moscow, Su-14-1 was used for long-range bombardment. This tank was actually used in battle. This tank was actually used for battle. Realistically, this tank was actually used in battle. This tank is no longer on the tech tree. This tank is called the collector's tank. Isn't it funny that none of these are real? None of these were ever manufactured, ever. But yet the only one that was manufactured is a collector's tank. Okay, we could check these. The smaller tiers, I don't know. I'm just curious on 8, 9, and 10. I'm curious to see what status of these were. So this was never made. This existed only in blueprints. And this, only one prototype was... This existed only in blueprints. The collector's version of this tier 8. Collector's version, one prototype was manufactured. That prototype was used during the battle for Moscow. That's it. One prototype existed. We don't know to this day if that one prototype still exists. Knowing those people, they saved everything. I guarantee you they probably have this and that still stored somewhere. God forbid. For what I do know, I do think that they still have a small handful of these. I think they do have a small handful of these, I think. This did see service. The reason why it saw service is because the gun was the gun was able to penetrate the armor of the German tanks. It was one of the few tanks that was able to penetrate the armor of the German tanks. Now I'm curious. Everybody loves this tank. I'm curious if this tank actually existed and at what point. Now, we all know that the KV-2 tank, the base is a KV-1. They were used in action in 1941. Most of the vehicles were lost the same year. Okay. Just like any other Russian tank, they made 334 of these. All 334 were destroyed the same year they made them. Am I surprised? Not at all surprised. Not at all. I am not surprised at all. I mean, look at the track record that the current tanks have. They're losing 250,000 tanks a year. They blew out of their stocks of T-90s. They're gone. Every T-90 in Russia right now is gone. Ukraine destroyed every single T-90 that Russia ever had. They're delving into Cold War stocks right now. They're delving into the Cold War stocks. And if this war keeps going on the way it's going, they're going to be delving into the World War II stocks soon. It's insane. It really is insane. They're going to be delving into this soon. I guarantee you. You're going to be seeing some of this. Pretty soon you're going to be seeing a lot of this. Like T-54s and T-44s, T-54s. I mean, you're going to be seeing a lot of that stuff pretty soon. I don't think... Honestly, I don't believe that Russia even has a heavy tank. I don't think they ever... After the IS-3... A lot of these heavy tanks after the IS-3 and IS-3s. IS-4 was only IS-4, only one prototype existed. That's it, only one. IS-7 was never created, period. So, the T-10, I think the T-10 existed, but not a lot. They only made like 100 or 200 of them. Objects obviously only existed in blueprints. I know that for a fact. Anything that's an object only existed in blueprints. It was not a real tank. And also, between you and me, objects also could be something that the game came up with too. There are a few tanks that are far-fetched. For example, these. These are awful far-fetched. I mean, this is what the game has to say about these. A project of double-barreled vehicle based off the mass-produced IS-3 heavy tanks. So, again, a mass-produced IS-3. What they claim is that they took the bottom part of an IS-3, made a brand new turret, made a brand new wider turret, put 2 guns on it, put 2 loaders in it, 1 loader for each gun. And that's how the IS-3-2 was made. That's what they claim. Existed only in blueprints. It had to have, because in reality, to make that work, let me show you guys something. They claim to have put 2 guns on an IS-3 with a wider turret. Now, Pay no attention to the turret. Okay, guys? You're not paying attention to this. What you're paying attention to is this. They claim that they were going to take an IS-3, tear the turret and the gun off, tear the turret off, put a bigger turret on, a wider turret and a bigger turret. How? The turret is the same width as the tank. How are they going to make a bigger turret? The turret is already the same width as the tank. You can't. Turret has to be taller. Instead of being pointed and angled, the turret is straight. And they probably what they probably did was tore the turret off, made the turret higher and more boxy, and just stuck two of these guns, two of these 122s on one turret, and put two loaders in the turret. Two loaders and two gunners. There are two loaders, two gunners, a radio man, and a commander. And of course a driver. In reality, that could work. This could be possible. You could put two guns on an IS-3. Why? Because the turret is a wide turret. But the only thing is, you lose the reason why the IS-3 was so valuable in the first place. The reason why the IS-3 was so valuable was because of what's called sloped armor. When you're firing at an IS-3 from here, only thing you have to fire at is here, and that's angled. Okay? This is angled. This is not. Okay, there's a track behind it. Okay, they blow the track. That's fine. That's angled. That's angled. That's angled. That's angled. The turret. Angled. Angled. That's not. Okay. All the armor is angled, so which means finding a penetration place is going to be near to impossible on this tank. The front has so much angled armor. Now look at the IS-3-2. Let's go take a peek at the IS-3-2. I own that tank, so we can look at that tank. Now this is the IS-3, but it has the -2 designation. Same hull, same bottom, same tracks. The turret has been changed. It's wider. Instead of it being sloped, it's higher. See that? The turret is no longer sloped. It's more squared off. See that? And it's very, very tall. And it's very large. This is a very large turret. It has to be large because it has to have ammunition for two guns. It has to have one gunner with two loaders. So you have the commander. Oh, okay. Commander, two gunners, two loaders. So which, oh, this, wait, no, this is, no, it's not a, that's a driver. Okay, so the driver is here. Commander is here. Gunner is here. And loaders are back here. So loaders, gunner, driver, commander. Because there's no radio man, so the commander is also the radio man. And the radio man has access to the fire extinguishers. So make sure you have, in the game only, make sure your commander, make sure your radio man has the firefighting skill, and make sure you have an automatic fire extinguisher or a manual fire extinguisher. Automatic is better. Because God forbid, if you do not have the skill, you do not have a fire extinguisher, your tank will say, "There's a fire, put it out." And they won't put it out. It'll just burn until your tank gets blown up. If you have an automatic fire extinguisher, they'll say, "Fire, quick, put it out." If you have this, an automatic fire extinguisher, as soon as the commander says, "Quick, put out the fire," the radio man will immediately jump into action, grab the fire extinguisher, and put it out. Now, if you have a manual fire extinguisher like this one, the commander will say, "Quick, put out the fire." It's up to you as a player to push the button and put out the fire. If you don't do that, and they have the firefighting skill, eventually they will find a way to put the fire out. It will take a lot longer, and the tank will be almost half dead by then. But they will put out the fire on their own. But you'll take a tremendous amount of damage in the process. The reason why they did this is because the gunner is here. The gunner has a job to fire the gun. The loaders have a job to load the guns and keep the ammo secure. So if there is a fire, the loaders immediately run to the ammunition storage and secure the storage so the fire doesn't get to the ammo. Now you have the radio man and the commander and the driver left to put out the fire. The driver has 3 levers and a little tiny hole. To get out of the driver's seat is near to impossible. It's very, very difficult. In a normal tank, a radio man is a separate job. The radio man just sits behind the radio, communicating with all the other tanks, trying to find out positions of the enemy. Now, if the commander uses the commander's hatch to try and detect other people, the commander doubles as the commander is the person that detects other tanks. So if there's a tank in front of you in the game, you spot them. The commander is the person that spots a tank. Know that. The reason why is because the commander is the only person that has no job. The commander's only task is to be able to do all the jobs of the tank and jump out and lead repairs on the tank on the fly if need be. That's the reason why you usually have repairs, mentor, usually have twice the amount of skills on a commander than you do with all the rest. Because the commander has to be able to do his job and everybody else's job if they get knocked out. If a crew member gets knocked out, the radio man has to try and get that crew member back up and running. If they can't, the commander has to take over. That's the way it goes. If you get 2 crew members knocked out, the tank can't survive. A tank crew can survive if one crew member gets knocked out. A tank cannot survive if 2 get killed. If 2 get killed, you're done for. Alright guys, I guess we're going to call it a day. This is not going to be a let's play at this point. I think I might post this on an update. Or World of Tanks Let's Chat, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'll post this under video game updates. Because really that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm kind of updating you guys on stuff, on weird stuff like that. This is just a very weird situation. It's basically explanations about like kayfabe stuff and what's real in the game, what's kind of like made up, for the game. Like I said before, there are a lot of stuff in this game that did exist in real life, and a lot of it did exist only in blueprints. But stuff that actually was used in real life, very few tanks in this game were actually really used. Other than the ones I showed you. The ones I showed you, most of them were used. Most of them were produced. In fact, the T-34, Russia still has those tanks and still uses those, still parades those in their Victory Day parades to this day. That tank was built in 1943, and they drive that down for the Victory Day parades they have every single year. So that tank still exists to this day. Meanwhile, the KV tanks, who the hell knows? I mean, they probably have them in museums, but they don't parade them around. The KV tanks are probably in museums, but that's probably it. The T-34s, they still use them in parades. I do know that. As far as all the new tanks, like the T-10s and all like that, and your T-10s and your T-54 Twilights, some of them, they made prototypes, like that one artillery I showed you guys, SU-14-11, the collector's tank. One was made. It was a prototype. And they used it. They used that one prototype for the Battle of Moscow. That's it. They used that one collector's tank, that one artillery, for one battle. That's it. It existed. It was really used in real life. But they took it out of the regular tech tree. Why? Don't know. It's a collector's tank, yes. It should be a collector's tank because it was really used. Instead, they replaced it with bullshit tanks. A lot of the tanks in the tech tree, a lot of them are bullshit. I'd like to say 90% of the tanks in the tech trees are all bullshit. The collector tanks, a lot of the collector tanks were either really made, really used, or were used, but maybe used like once, and that's it. Very rarely will you see a blueprint tank in the collector's tanks. All the collector's tanks were used at some point. Although there are a lot of tanks in the tech trees that were used. For example, the IS-3. That tank was manufactured. That tank was used, but limited amount were manufactured, of course. They only made a certain amount of them. That was it. I think the IS-3s were made for the Cold War, but IS-3s were made at the end of World War II. So anything here was made after World War II. Anything tier 9 and 10 is after World War II. So if you are in a tier 9 or tier 10 tank, 90% of the time, none of those tanks existed in real life. Because the end of World War II is tier 8. Tier 8 is the end of World War II. I mean, we're talking World War II is on its last possible day. So any tanks manufactured at the end of World War II, I mean, that's it. Notice you're seeing a lot more designations. See? You don't see a lot of objects in tier 8s. You notice that? Tier 8 and under, you don't see a lot of objects. Want to know why? Because a lot of this is the only exception. Well, this tank, honestly, this is possibly the worst tank in the game, but technical problems with the turret. Yeah. When you play the game, you see what technical problems they have with the turret. It never entered mass production. Why? There was technical problems with the turret. I have this tank. The turret has multiple problems. There's a gap in between the turret and the turret ring. A well-placed shot on the turret ring, the whole turret goes up in turret toss. This tank has some serious issues, which is the reason why it was never produced. This tank was never produced for that very reason. The turret was faulty. It had a faulty turret. That's fine. Makes sense. Makes sense for not making it. It does. The fact of the matter is the engine is in the front. Let me show you guys this tank first so you guys can see it. This is the tank. Okay, guys? Now the engine is in the front of the tank. It's right here. This is the engine. This is the engine. Okay? Now, the exhaust is right there. So, the exhaust fumes are coming out, are billowing out right there, right here. See? So the engine's right here. Now, in reality, tank looks okay. But think of it this way. Armor underneath the lower glaciers, regardless of how good your tank is, this has to be thin. Has to be. The thinnest part of the armor is always here. The reason being is because they have to save weight to allow the tank to go faster. You have to make the armor weak in certain spots so that this way it's able to go faster. Now, German tanks, of course, were not like that. They didn't believe in having it go faster. They wanted it to be impervious to damage. So, obviously, they armored everything up. But Russians, no. Weak spots, obviously, here. Remember I said the turret was a mistake? There's a turret ring right there. All you have to do is pop one shot right under the turret. Whole turret will toss right off. This turret is faulty. That's the reason why this tank was not made. This turret is faulty. Plus, the engine is in the front. All they have to do is just... Artie has to pop one shot right here. Blow the engine and the gun. Engine and the gun are both gone. Now, fuel. Where's the fuel? Now, you see a problem here? Fuel is back here. That's good. But that also means that there's a fuel pipe, a fuel pump, pumping fuel from here to here. Which means that somehow all you have to do is place a well-placed shot. If this turret is faulty, if this faulty turret, all you have to do is place a well-placed shot at the turret, it blows the ammunition. Ammunition severs the fuel line leading to the front. That blows the entire tank to smithereens. That's why the Russians, Soviets did not manufacture this tank. This tank is faulty. In reality, this tank was not designed right. Whoever decided to put the engine in the front was smoking something. Probably on some weed. Probably smoking something, I guarantee you. Smoking something not nice. Because this is not a good design at all. Not a good design at all. Okay, guys. It's getting close to that time. We've been at this for 2 hours now. Okay, guys. So, we're going to call this video game updates, I guess. So, thank you very much for watching the channel. And thank you very much for tuning in to Video Game Updates. Please stay tuned for more information on all your favorite games that I cover. Very soon I'm going to have another update with with more robots. So stick around for that one. I'm also going to have another update on MechWarrior Online Legends. Also, I'm also going to be doing a video on Steam on a new game. I'm also going to be featuring a brand new game on Steam very soon. Not now, but very soon. I have to find out. I want to find out more information about the game first. I'm going to gather information about the game first, then get the game, then tell you guys information about the game and how it started and stuff, more stuff about the actual game. So, okay. So, with that in mind, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in to video game updates. Please like, subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and please stay tuned for more videos coming soon. Also, Sunday, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, I'll be having a live stream. Random topics. We can discuss stuff. You can watch me play games. Whatever you guys want, you tell me what you want in chat. We'll chat live. Or we'll just... You guys don't want to chat. You guys want to watch me play a game. Tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. You want to chat? Won't do anything. I will just chat back and forth. Alright guys. So thank you very much again for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. See you guys on Sunday.